Good evening to all you Broncos fans out there, ready for Mile High Insiders. But of course, it's not Mile High Insiders totally because Luke's out, but my co-host from Orange and Blue View on Saturday, Ron White, is here. So we're still going to have a great show. How you doing, Ron? Welcome to Mile High Insiders.
I'm doing well, Thomas. Thank you for having me on this Wednesday. I'm looking forward to talking with all of you Broncos fans.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. We've got a lot of trade rumors
hmm
just flying around today, talking about Jerry Jeudy. Even people are making up some ridiculous pretend offers that they would send for Patrick Surtain the second. It's quite interesting to say the least with all these rumors going around. But the Broncos are probably going to field calls about several players. Whether they trade them or not is a different story. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of reasons out there why a trade wouldn't go through. So we'll see what it is, but we'll get into all that. We're going to talk about several of the players who were mentioned today, especially Patrick Surtain the second. And we'll go from there, and we'll listen to your comments. Anybody coming in, jump in there and let us know what you think, and we'll go from there. Ron, how you been, man? Since the week meet and greet, we just got back. It was fast and furious over the weekend, and back at it. How are you doing since then?
I'm doing well, and it was great to see our community show up at the meet and greet. It was lovely talking to many of you guys. It was a good time. It was nice and buzzing, and the Broncos got the victory as well. So we're still undefeated when it comes to these meet and greets. So it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, thank you guys for showing up. It was great to meet each and every one of you. I had a blast.
Yeah, it was a great time. It was a great time, and I'm actually now 6-0 in regular season games when I go live watch the Broncos. So
Okay.
they should start paying me to go to the games. Maybe they can start winning. I don't know. It was a good luck charm or something. But it dates all the way back to 1998, in when I watched the Broncos play in the Kingdome way back when. So it started back then, and it's still holding strong. So hopefully that streak continues. But yeah, it was great. It was a great time at the meet and greet. A lot of fun. A lot of people there. Met a lot of people that I hadn't met before that I've talked to in the chat. So it was really good. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, enough about the meet and greet, I guess. Let's get into this. Your thoughts on Patrick Surtain getting traded, Ron?
Yes. So I would say I'm not a fan of it. I don't want it to happen personally, but I do see a reason why it could happen. Because well, at first the conversations shouldn't start, with anything other than a few first round picks that we're talking about in order for a team to acquire Patrick Surtain. He is of that caliber of a player. So I can see definitely that the conversations would be had possibly to see what other teams are wanting for his services. But I guess me being more of the Bronco fan that I am, I just don't want him to go, just because that's also another side, Thomas, that you'd have to worry about. We do have Patrick Surtain as the number one corner on this team, and trading him would open up another glaring hole that you'll have to fill, at some time in the offseason. So, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I guess I can understand why the Broncos would maybe even start to field calls, and even if it comes to fruition, I can see why as well.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's the one tradable piece that the Broncos have that can net a draft haul. It really is, and that's why people are saying it. But it's funny because I was on Twitter today. There was a Dallas Cowboys fan that was tweeting at Jerry Jones saying, it would take you. I mean, you might not even get a player like that in 5 first round draft choices. So go trade for him. I'm like, well, that's the reason why you wouldn't want to trade Pat Surtain, right? I mean, if it's so hard to find an impact player and maybe a future Hall of Famer the way he's playing, you don't trade him away at this age. If he was 32, okay, maybe you do, but he's your young piece that you build around. So it's pretty hard for me to see them trading them. And I went into I built the draft trade calculator based on a full decade of drafts. And if you were to trade 3 first-round draft choices for Pat Surtain, you already know he's an impact player. You have less than a 50% chance of getting another impact player in the draft, and even less than it's like 0.03 of getting 2 out of 3 first-round draft choices. You get starters, but that's not what this team needs. This team needs impact players.
Right.
So if you're going to get rid of your young core best player on the team for 3 first-round draft choices, you better be very, very lucky in that draft to hit on some players. So I don't see it happening. I'm sure they're going to take calls, but I have a hard time seeing them. I mean, that's your rebuild. That's a piece that you rebuild with, right?
Mm-hmm.
You really have other pieces that you need to get rid of in order to rebuild, but he really isn't one of them. But again, that's your big key piece. So I can understand why people are talking about it, but I just don't. They'd have to. I don't even know. I don't even know if I would go with 3 first-round draft choices. I don't think anyone would give more than that. So I don't know why we're really, even considering it at this point. But going to shout out to Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, "Good evening, Thomas and Ron on the Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos." Thank you for being here, Michael. Really appreciate it. As always, we appreciate your support and appreciate your comments while we discuss our Broncos, whether they win or lose. So thank you very much. And also Phil McLaughlin coming in with some support from Facebook Star saying, "Good evening, Thomas and Ron. Hard to lose Surtain or Judy or Simmons, etc. But picks are critical to rebuilding." And then hashtag Buckham, hashtag Go Broncos. Now, Phil, I'll say this. Some of these players, it would, as a fan or something, and even as someone that's hoping that, you do somehow find a way to win and have a good season after starting 1-5, now 2-5. You don't want to see these players gone, but from a rebuild perspective, if the Broncos really think that they're going to start rebuilding, and there's a lot of people out there saying that they should, but if they truly believe in it, there's a couple things that you have to think about, right? If you're going to trade somebody, is that player in the team's future, right? Do you think after 2024 season, is that player going to still be on the Broncos? So you got to consider that. And then you have to also consider, will the player's contract be prohibitive to rebuilding? And if you trade them, will that relieve that burden, so to speak? So you've got those 2 questions to ask. And then, I always like to say, is the player's contract not, is it disproportionate to his production, so to speak? So if you can kind of think about those 3 questions when you're looking at players, and then, if that trade will, answer those 3 questions or a couple of those questions, and we'll get value based on those, then you got to consider it. And so when you think about Surtain, I don't consider it, but you think about someone like Justin Simmons, right? I don't think he's in the team's plans after 2024. He's he's 31 now. A safety's peak is, our defensive backs peak is around 25, 26, and they start to fall off at 28, 29. He's already past that peak, and he's on his. So to consider trading Simmons, that's a piece you would really consider, because it's not going to be around. So you try and get something for him. Now the big question is, what do you get for Simmons?
Yes.
What do you think someone's going to offer for him, Ron? That's the big question.
Yeah, and thank you, Phil, for coming in for that comment. We appreciate you, my man. And perfectly said, Thomas. Just from a high level, I want to just Scott, can you flash that comment back up? I want to look at each of these 3 players, Phil, that you called out. So Surtain, we know that Surtain is in the future for these Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
So we don't want to touch him. Again, I can see them maybe fielding some calls just to kind of see what teams are asking, things like that. I can definitely see Surtain kind of, fielding those calls. So, but you don't want to lose him at all. What has Judy done? I'm looking at this season in particular, that we can say that he's in this team's future plans. I would say, the past seasons he's been great, but this season he's kind of taken a downturn. Sutton has outperformed Judy. So, and not only with that, you have the character concerns as well with Judy, and it's just not a good look for the Denver Broncos. So I can see them moving on for Judy, depending on what that compensation looks like. Obviously, it was a 1st-round pick, maybe looking at something like a 2nd or a 3rd. And then Simmons. It's going to be hard to move away from Simmons, but it's understandable, right? He's getting older. All he's known is losing. He's getting to a point where, in the next few years, retirement is probably going to be knocking on the door, and he wants to get to a contender. Granted, he still has great years in him left to play. So when you look at that, Phil, it's, you kind of have to look at it player by player, and the only one worth keeping around is Surtain. Now, Thomas, it does depend on what they get back for these picks, because we just saw that the Eagles got Kevin Byard, and that was a 5th and a 6th round pick.
They didn't get a whole lot.
They didn't get a whole lot at all. So Tennessee didn't get a whole lot back. So you have to think about the compensation in return for if you trade Simmons. Is the juice worth the squeeze? That's the main thing.
I guess my question for that would be, if you are going to get something for Simmons and you are going to go rebuild, why not take what you can get, so to speak? I mean, obviously you're not going to a 7th rounder. It's probably worth having around, but there's going to be front office that will trade for Simmons, because for his level of play or his expected level of play, his contract isn't too huge. You're not taking on this massive contract. I mean, 2024, I think his cap hit's like 14 million for, that's quite a ways down the cap hits for a lot of the safeties that are above him. So I think they're willing to give something, but if you base it off of what the Eagles gave up, you're probably not going to get a huge haul for him. But again, like I said, if you're going to rebuild, you need to clear up cap space, number one, and you need to get some draft picks so that you can get younger. Excuse me. So that accomplishes both, right? You're going to clear up, 14 million next year of cap space, I think is what it is. Don't quote me on the numbers. I'm just kind of going off of memory. And you're going to probably get a draft choice for him. So that's what you have to consider on Simmons, even if it does seem like from the outside looking in and you see that Simmons goes for like a 5th rounder or something, people are going to probably be upset. But at the same time, he's not the face of the franchise. He's not like trading away Von Miller for a 2nd and a 3rd, right? He's probably not a future Hall of Famer at this point. So, maybe it'll look bad by taking less, but you're still going to accomplish a few things that you need to do in your rebuild. That's my thoughts. Phil's coming back in with a follow-up question. Thank you, Phil. He says, as a follow-up, who would you guys see leaving, whose contracts are getting restructured? Well, that's a good question, because there are several players, I think, on the team that have an out after the season that they can cut and not take a big cap hit, so to speak. I mean, obviously the big one is, what are you going to do with Russell Wilson? I mean, that's the big one, right? What are you going to do with Russell Wilson's contract? If you talk about that second question that I had, what is their cap? Is their salary prohibitive to rebuilding? Yes, is definitely rebuild. But I don't know how you're going to take the cap hit one way or the other. If he's not in the future, they're probably going to try and salvage it. But from my perspective, you do it sooner rather than later. If that's the case, you do it as soon as you can, take that hit and try and move on. I think Garrett Bowles, if you're not trading Garrett Bowles, I think he's got, man, I can't, I should look this up. I think he has an out after this season, but I'm not 100% positive on that. So you've got a few that you can look at. But then again, there's also some players that you gave money to who are also, like, I think DJ Jones is up for his contract's up soon. Josie Jewell is definitely, his contract's over this year. So you have some players that you're going to be able to get out of the contracts of pretty easily coming up. But I don't know who's going to get restructured. When I consider Bowles, I mean, it's another one who is playing pretty well. I mean, he struggled at first, but he's playing pretty well, but he's also 31. And you consider, I mean, there are some offensive tackles, some offensive linemen that are really good, that still maintain a high level of play into their, mid 30s. But Bowles isn't one that strikes me that, he's that good that he's going to maintain that level of play. So you probably don't restructure him. You probably go ahead and say, yeah, well, we're going to see if we can get something for you.
Yeah, I agree with you on Bowles. I mean, some other names, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Simmons. I don't see those guys playing on their current deals next year, so I can see some restructures there. Leaving, I, maybe a Josie Jewell or someone, maybe after this year, we'll see. That one may be a little bit far fetched, just because this past game we saw Josie Jewell kind of have that impact, and I don't know what the plan is or the team's plan for Drew Sanders, because they drafted him. I thought they would play him more. He's been very limited on the field. So, but yeah, I can definitely see Sutton, Patrick, Bowles, Simmons looking at a restructure.
And that's the question I have about whether or not Sean Payton is in on a rebuild, because he's not playing any of the younger guys. If you wanted to get a gauge at this point of some of the younger guys and who you should trade, so if you wanted to know what JL Skinner had to offer on the field on game day, so that you could say, oh yeah, let's get rid of Simmons, why wouldn't you be having him on the field at all, right?
Yes.
He's not playing Drew Sanders. Mims isn't getting a lot of playing time. Some of these younger guys aren't getting the playing time. Riley Moss. So it just makes me think, are they really sellers at the deadline? I mean, I don't know if they are, based on what they've been doing up until this point, right? I don't know. So it's interesting. It's a tough read what I got. I mean, you think they would be playing some of those younger guys, but maybe they are just going to wait till the last minute, see where they're at, trade some players, bring the young guys in. I don't know. Naj, thank you for the support. Appreciate it, coming with a super chat. Ron and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I was just saying, hey, brothers, great meeting you, brothers, this past weekend. Fantastic win. I don't see Peyton trading anyone unless the value makes sense. When we beat the Chiefs this weekend, how does this trade talk change? It was great meeting you too, Naj. Thank you so much for all of your support and being here all the time. We really appreciate it. Now, I actually was talking with my wife about this past week, and I said, if the Broncos beat the Chiefs, I'm kind of on board with them having an okay season the rest of the way. If they somehow can win the next two games, then I think they got it. They're going to make a run. But if they lose to the Chiefs, they better be sellers. If they can't win versus the Chiefs, that's your barometer, right? If you can beat the Chiefs, get a win at home against the team that's beaten you 16 in a row, then maybe it does change, in my perspective, a little bit. Maybe you're not as big as sellers, but you still need to be somewhat of a seller, because you have to get cap relief space. The Broncos, I think, are negative 20 million next year, if I remember correctly, in salary cap already. I mean, that's what the projected without any moves. So you've got to get some space. And then the other thing that's been really ailing this team is they've traded away so many picks to try and fix it all, right? They tried to fix the quarterback position. They tried to fix the coach, and it's not paid dividends at this point. So I think you've got to make some sort of moves, even if they do beat the Chiefs.
Thank you, Naj, for coming in with your super chat, and it was great to meet you as well. I would say, yeah, if the Broncos beat the Chiefs, expect the trade talks to just simmer a bit. I still think they need to Scott's point, I still think they need to look into being sellers, selling maybe not as many players as once anticipated at the trade deadline. But these big names, like Simmons, possibly even Judy, expect them to stay with Denver. I would even say, Thomas, if they beat the Chiefs, right, they might go on a little mini run and possibly be a buyer or two. Could be, possibly. We'll see. We kind of have to see how this weekend shakes out.
Obviously. Yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We definitely need to get this, this Chiefs victory first. But yeah, I would say, Naj, definitely look at that. The trade talks for the big names just cooling, but I would say that they would still need to sell off a few players.
Yeah. Okay, Gary Palmer coming in with some support. Thank you so much, Gary. Wish we could have met you at the meet and greet again this year. I know things happen. You can't come up there, but you were there in spirit, hopefully, and we really appreciate you on these podcasts for sure. And Gary comes in saying, good evening, Thomas and Ron. I don't think there will be much action, but I am a supporter of George Payton, so you never know. Go Broncos. Gary, you may be right. They may just not be getting a good enough offer, or they think that they're, fine how they are. I don't know what they're thinking. I think that there's really only about 5 real players that that are really on the block, so to speak, that people would call about, that, they're not going to hang the phone up on when they do it. So, and then you got to consider, of those 5, really who's going to offer what. And, you could be right. It may be one player when it's all said and done that even gets traded, or none. Who knows? It depending on what Sean Payton's, I guess, optimism is for the rest of the season with, with the how it goes against the Chiefs on Sunday, I guess.
Yeah, Gary, thank you for coming in. And that's kind of what I've been thinking, because, in my mind, if there's not been much action now, then I don't think there's going to be much action, a week from today. There's been rumors out there with Jerry Jeudy, the talks, with the Colts. Seems like that's not going anywhere. I know Justin Simmons' name was floated with the Eagles. Obviously, the Eagles now have Byard. So I just don't see much more action that's going to happen. Now, I'm with you as far as George Payton and his draft prowess. I think that's where a lot of, people support him. He's a very good scout when it comes to the draft. But, we'll see what happens, at the deadline. Again, I don't want to get my hopes up. I did have about 3 or 4 players being moved, as a prediction prior to the deadline, but I don't see that happening now. I just don't.
Yeah, and you got to consider too. I mean, look, their schedule isn't really conducive for a nice run. I mean, they've got some pretty tough games left. Still got a lot of AFC West games, which can go either way. Got to go to Buffalo. Minnesota's looking a little tougher than they had been. Houston looked like it was going to be a win checked off before the season started. They actually look pretty tough. You got Detroit. It's not an easy schedule coming up. So even if they do beat the Chiefs, you got to consider that it's going to be pretty tough for them to make any real noise down the stretch. David McIlrath's coming in with some support. Thank you so much, David. Great meeting you at the meet and greet. Thank you for being there. It was awesome. He's saying, good evening, Broncos country. Tom, Ron, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. It was great to meet you both. Thanks for everything. Mile High Huddle for life. Buckham ×3 and Denver Broncos for life. Thank you, David. Appreciate you being here tonight. And again, it was great meeting you.
Thank you, David. It was awesome to meet you, my man. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, so we got Casey Nickel coming in for with a super chat saying, "Whoa, great to see you both on Wednesday. Love it." Yeah, yeah. Luke's got prior engagements, so Ron, we're doing Mile High Insiders, but it's the it's the Orange and Blue View crew. So thanks for the support, Casey. Really appreciate it. Troy Boer coming in with a generous super chat. Thank you very, very much. Saying, hey guys, great to meet you both on Sunday. It was nice to meet you. Any chance we could trade Sutton for Chase Young? Have a great show. Ron, what are your thoughts on that? I've got some thoughts on that right out of the gate, but what do you think?
Thank you, Troy, for coming in. It was great to meet you as well, sir. As far as your question is concerned, I don't see it. I just don't see it. Just because, again, what Courtland Sutton has shown this season thus far, he's, I think it's at 5 touchdowns now, I believe. So, I mean, he's very productive this year, kind of looking like that 2019 Pro Bowl year, something similar to that. So, and we've seen how Peyton has used him in this offense. So with that, and then with Chase Young is so injury prone. So I get the need for Chase Young help, on that defensive front at edge. But I just don't see the value when you trade Courtland Sutton. I feel as though if we were to get another edge, we can maybe look elsewhere, possibly look, obviously we're going to need in the draft. So I just don't see the value in return for trading a Pro Bowl wide receiver like Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, and then on top of it, you got to pay Chase Young right away, right? He's a free agent coming up. Yep. So then you're kind of trading for something that you may not you're going to have to pay, and who knows if you, so I don't know. You'd be getting rid of Sutton, but you're not going to get cap relief, so to speak, if you really want to keep Chase Young around. So it kind of, I mean, I get the question for sure. I mean, Chase Young's really kind of underperformed, so to speak, injuries and whatnot in Washington. So maybe you can work out some sort of deal. But here's the thing with Sutton for me. Sutton is definitely someone you would pick up the phone and listen to trade talks. He's not one of those wide receivers who's so great that he's out of the question. But from my perspective, he's playing quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I know his salary is a little high for his production, so to speak, but as you go along for a couple more years, that's not going to be too prohibitive. And, if you get a true number one and you have, like a really, really good dynamic wide receiver like Mims, in his sophomore year, Sutton is a good complement to that. Right. So I thought for sure that they would trade Sutton, but I'm not so sure they really will unless they get a pretty good deal now. And it really has to do with the fact that wide receivers, they have a peak, but they don't have this major drop off for a few more years into their 30s, right? And so if Sutton can continue to stay healthy and, contribute the way he's contributing, he might be an okay piece for the next 2 years to have as a compliment to Mims or whoever that wide receiver one comes in. So I don't know if I don't think that's an equitable trade. I think there's going to have to be something thrown in to get Chase Young and Sutton between the two. So I don't know if that's a straight up deal, but I kind of have a feeling that they want to keep Sutton around for a little bit longer. It just seems that way. They seem to be kind of highlighting him in the offense a little bit more, especially more than Judy. And he is producing. He's not dynamic. He's not doing, he's not leading the league. I mean, I think he's like, 17th in the league or something that's not great, but for what the Broncos have, he's their best option. So
yeah,
we'll see, but I have this feeling he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And as Phil mentioned here, thank you, Phil, for coming with this comment. This is right on. Young would be another Gregory, in my opinion. I agree. I just think, the availability factor, he just won't be available, to make those impact plays. Of course, when on the field, they're great. Gregory and Chase Young. It's just a matter of they're not on the field. So,
yeah. We got a question, another question from Phil. Will Jackson be here end of the season, and will George be gone next year? And I'm assuming it's Kareem Jackson. He's suspended for a couple days. He's gone at the end of the season anyway. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be 36 years old. I doubt he's going to get re-signed. He might hang him up. So before the end of the season, I don't see anybody trying to trade for him really. So yeah, he'll be gone at the end of the season. He'll be gone this offseason. He's not going to be around. He may come back, if they offer him a coaching position. I don't know. They seem to like his leadership, so he might be on the team. I don't know. That'd be good. And then the second question is, will George be gone next year, or George Payton? That's a good question. A lot of people have put a lot of opinions out there. I think the big thing is someone's going to take a fall for that huge Russell Wilson contract that didn't need to happen, and that's on him. So he may be the one that takes the fall for that. So, yeah, it's hard to say, but I think someone's gonna have to take the blame for that big mistake. I mean, don't get me wrong, GMs make mistakes all the time. That was just a big one, a really big one.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for coming back in. And I agree, Thomas, on your first point on Kareem Jackson. Yeah, he's going to be released. He's gone. I just don't see, what value other than his leadership, what else can he provide for this team? His reputation precedes him. These, egregious hits and such. He's gone. For George Payton, that one's tough. I would say, yeah, the Russell contract didn't help, but also you have to think about some of these other contracts as well. Bringing in some of these other free agents, with Nathaniel Hackett as well, that hiring. I think there are a lot of, not just the Russell Wilson contract, but there are a lot of other moves that George Payton made that I don't see him keeping his job. So I can definitely see them moving on from him next year. Now we know that his draft acumen is great. His scouting is good. He has a knack for getting the talent, but I just think some of the moves that he's made while he's been the GM of the Denver Broncos have not been good, and I think that's going to kind of contribute to the downfall in his release.
And I'll play devil's advocate just a little bit because there's value. I mean, obviously the ownership has value for George Payton, right? I mean, they sent him to do the negotiations and stuff this offseason. So there is reasons to keep him, right? There are reasons to keep him around. He's a pretty good scout. He's got an NFL acumen. It all depends, I guess, on to me are they going to have someone take the brunt of the big mistakes, and that would be his. And does Sean Payton and George Payton work together, right? Does it seem like they work well together, and can the future be better with them together? Or are they just going to say, we're going to bring somebody else in that we think works better with Sean Payton rather than George Payton? So my guess is he's gone. Because the season's not what they thought it was going to be, and someone's going to have to pay the consequences. And I think it's going to be him. And we got Eric Smith's in the chat here saying something about talk Russ into restructuring, right? I don't think they can. I think they're pretty much, maybe down the road they can try and restructure, but that contract is massive. Yeah. You got a base salary at what, 50 million at 39 years old or something like that. I don't know, man. You could try something, but then you're going to just prolong that. Probably going to have to bring even more of a dead cap hit if he doesn't play well, because you're going to have to turn some of it into bonuses. I'm not a cap guru. I'm sure it could happen. I'm sure that was the plan, but with how he's not a superstar, he's not on the level of some of these other top quarterbacks. So do you want to prolong the inevitable when you're going to have to get rid of him? I don't know. It's the cap hit is going to be massive. If they don't want to hang on to Russ for the long haul, it's going to be a massive cap hit. They're going to have to just bite it and bite it off and chew it and, live with it and hope that you have a replacement for him in the wings from this draft. If you can, really. It's so weird, Ron. I don't know what they think of Russell Wilson, right? Like, what does Sean Payton think of Russell Wilson? He's not playing terrible. He had a bad game, but if you look at how he's playing, he's playing fairly well. He's missed reads. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's, a great quarterback all the time, but he's also, is he in your future? Do you see him still quarterbacking this team 3 years from now? And that's where I got to go. But that contract is so detrimental to rebuild. It is.
And no, well said, Thomas. Eric, I would say, I just don't see them talking. I don't think Russ is not going to restructure. I definitely see your logic though. But I think that's the main question that I have, Thomas, is it's hard for me to get an understanding and a beat on how Peyton really feels about Wilson. And we know at the end of the day, the coaches, they're going to back up their players, they're going to back up their quarterback. But, as far as the play is concerned, it's that still remains to be seen. You're right. Obviously, Russell is playing way better than he did last year. But I think that's going to tell us and everyone kind of how they move forward with Russ, right? If they're just going to straight out release, eat that money, try to start fresh, it remains to be seen. But I would tell you, Eric, a restructure isn't going to happen.
Here's the thing, though, for me, the last few games that has bothered me is they have not been that aggressive.
Yeah.
Right, on offense. And is that because Sean Payton all of a sudden doesn't, because they were more aggressive earlier in the season. Now all of a sudden they got really, really conservative, especially in the red zone. Are they somehow saying, is Sean Payton somehow saying, oh, I don't trust Russell Wilson, I don't trust the offense, or is it just they're not calling aggressive play calls? I don't know. It really, that's been interesting to me. Why have they not attacked in the red zone? I don't remember them throwing many passes into the end zone the last couple of weeks when they were in the red zone. Why not attack? Why go super conservative? To me, that means, or you're not going to be able to evaluate Russell Wilson, what he really has to offer if you're going to play so conservative. And maybe they just know that he's just doesn't have it anymore, which I don't see. I mean, I see mistakes, but I also see some good plays from him as well. And statistically, he's back to where, almost his average over in Seattle. So I just don't understand it's hard to get a read on what's really happening with this team and what their feelings are. Like we said before, they're not playing the young guys. They're not even activating JL Skinner, even when they had 2 safeties. That tells me that, they're not evaluating the young guys, very well. And maybe they're just relying on practice, but there's a difference between game and practice for a lot of players. They just show up better in games. So are they not really pressing the offense much because they just they don't really trust Russell Wilson, or is it just that they just don't have the right play calls? I don't know. It's hard to get a read on what Sean Payton actually thinks of this team right now. I mean, I don't listen to what he says because he'll say whatever, but what is his real read on this team?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you look at stretches, Thomas. I'm thinking of, and you're right, it's when Mims is on the field. I think to get to what you were saying, because Mims hasn't been on the field a lot lately. And I'm thinking of that Washington game where Mims was tremendous. Like, we saw Russell in his element, throwing those deep balls and off of play action, right? And we don't see that now. I mean, again, we do see plays every now and again. We saw the Cortland Sutton touchdown, obviously, this past Sunday, but we just don't see this offense opening up like we did in, a few of those earlier games. So it does make you wonder, does Peyton not trust Wilson? We're going to go back to the running game, because we did see, Javonte McLaughlin go off this past game, which was great. I'm glad the running game is working, guys. I'm glad, but it does make you wonder just how they feel about Wilson. Maybe the faith isn't there anymore, and they've already come up with a decision. It's just, you're right. It's really hard to kind of gauge, how this team is feeling right now based on like the play calling and how Russell is playing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and there are improvements happening too, right? Like the offensive line has, outside of McGlinchey's still not playing great. He's, false starts. I've seen some, but the others have really Ben Powers has gotten much better since early on. Garrett Bowles as well. Lloyd Cushenberry, my surprise player, is one of the, playing one out the best out of the offensive line almost. Miners is playing pretty good. So you see the offensive line improving. You see Sutton is improving. He's getting better. I think the running backs are starting to get better. Obviously, the defense started to get a little bit better. I'm still, I'm not like a Vance Joseph guy right now. So don't read into that in any way. But they are playing a little bit better. So there's improvements going on with that. So it's hard to get a read on it. Phil McLaughlin's coming back in, and he's saying, I don't think Peyton has really evaluated enough players yet to trust some red zone calls. Hopefully that will improve next week. Well, I mean, if that's the case, man, what's taken him so long? I mean, good Lord. He had training camp. He had preseason. This is the 7th game. We just saw them play the 7th game of the season. How is he? Either he's already evaluated them and he doesn't trust them, or he has drug his feet on evaluation. I don't know, man. Wow. If that's true, man, he's really, I don't know. He's taking his sweet time, I guess. Maybe he was hoping for a midseason bounce. I don't know, but yeah, maybe he just doesn't trust the players for some reason. I don't know why, but I mean, Sutton is improved. Mims obviously is a dynamic wide receiver. Yes. Why aren't you, trying to get him in the action? I mean, little Jordan Humphrey not a dynamic player, but he's a big, receiver, tall, who can, you can throw it up to and make something happen. Just like have some guts and go out there and just try it. I mean, you've got to see what they can do anyway. And if they can't do it, then that's when you say, okay, these guys aren't the ones to do the job. We need to trade some people away and bring in some new, fresh faces that can do the job. I guess that's where I'm at on that.
Well said. I mean, just we're at 2-5. Let's go out and evaluate these players again. Get your deep threat mims on the field. Open up the playbook a little more. You have the quarterback, deep ball and Russell Wilson. You have the quarterback to do it. So why not just take risks and take chances? To evaluate these players as well. I don't see you have to evaluate them at some point, Thomas. And some of the decisions of like you mentioned, JL Skinner being inactive. Let's see what he has to offer. It's just mind-boggling how they're not playing a lot of these new players.
And they have nothing from their tight ends. Let's face it. Dulcich is continually hurt. Troutman, I actually thought Troutman was going to be a fairly solid player this year in this offense, but he's not there. I mean, what do you got at tight end? So you're kind of that really takes away an element of the offense when you just have no tight end that can do really anything. So, I mean, there's definitely flaws in the offense for sure. There's a lack of talent in certain spots, but at least, go out there and let it rip, man. What do you got to lose? 2-5, let it rip. Go out there and do it. I don't know. It's interesting, but there's a lot of metrics to evaluate what Russell Wilson's doing. So, I mean, I seen they're talking about QBR in the chat. I don't know who said it, but I'm going to tell you right now, QBR is one of the most flawed metrics out there. As an analyst looking at that, they've tried to tweak that thing several times. It's still not very effective. I mean, if you go back and look when they started in 2000, whatever they started 2008, when the Detroit Lions went 0-16 and the Steelers won the Super Bowl, the quarterback for the Lions had a better QBR than Roethlisberger, and they didn't win a damn game. So it's a flawed metric to me. But, I'm not trying to defend Russell Wilson by any means. I think he's statistically better. He's not a great quarterback, and he can be a good quarterback if, everything's going right. They got some good weapons around him, but right now he's struggled at times. So I don't know how to evaluate him fully. I don't know. I was hoping that he would be what we all were hoping for when they traded for him, but he hasn't been, and that's just a fact. He just hasn't been.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are getting to the top of the hour. I don't see a whole lot of other comments coming in. I'm just gonna kind of wrap this up with one thing here for some comments that come in, and that is I'm just gonna say I don't think they're going to trade Pat Surtain. I don't think you can offer enough no one's going to offer enough to make someone move on from him. But I think if you think about Sutton, you think about Judy, you think about Josie Jewell, to me, that's one that why would you trade for him? He's going to be an unrestricted free agent, but he's probably there. I think Justin Simmons, I think Garrett Bowles, those are your 5 guys that you really can trade if someone wants to offer you something for them. Whether they offer enough to make that worth your while, I don't know. But those are really, in my mind, the only 5 that are really tradable, so to speak, that have the opportunity to be traded for. And like I don't remember who said it. There's probably not going to be much action. There really isn't a lot of action. I know people are, you're going to sell everything and move on. That usually doesn't happen at the trade deadline. So you might see one player move. You really might. That might be all you see moved in at the trade deadline. 2 if they're lucky. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on that, Ron? I mean, is there somebody else you think that is tradable with the contracts that they have and worth something to somebody else at this point?
No, those 5 players are the ones on my list as well. And I think the more realistic players out of those 5 would be a Justin Simmons and a Jerry Jeudy. Those would probably be like the 2 most realistic to trade off. But yeah, I don't see anybody else out of those 5 players, as you mentioned, that would be moved.
Yeah. Well, Michael Ronquillo is going to send us off with a nice comment here saying, great show tonight, Thomas and Ron on Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos. Thank you for that, Michael. And don't forget, Ron and I will be back on Saturday for the Orange and Blue View, our show. There's plenty of other shows on here that one every night. So you pick what you want to see. One every morning. Scott's got Broncos for breakfast, Legends of Mile High on Friday morning. So, pick whatever one you're really interested in seeing, and you can't go wrong. A lot of different perspectives for sure. Phil McLaughlin coming with a comment here. So based on what we've seen, what do you guys feel is the most important position we need to fix, excluding Russ? Well, you coming in with a good comment here at the end in the show. Going to keep us around for a little bit longer. Go ahead.
I'm going to take this one. This is a great question, Phil. Thank you for coming in. Right tackle. Is the most important position we need to fix. We thought that we had an upgrade with Mike McGlinchey, but he's just been a big disappointment. Again, you mentioned, Thomas, the penalties, the false starts we've seen, just looking lost out there, and some of the protections. So I would say right tackle, we definitely need to get fixed. Now, not to say that McGlinchey, he has been playing replacement level, and hopefully he can, somewhat smooth it out and get it together at some point. But, we definitely need to get that fixed for sure.
Yeah, I would have said earlier in the season that you needed a better interior pass rush presence. I didn't think Zach Allen was that, but he's coming on. He's actually he's improved. So I'm willing to give him some more opportunity. So I do think they need to fix the defensive line a little bit more, but I'm willing to say that Zach Allen might turn into what we were hoping for. For me, you need, and maybe Baron Browning is that guy, but you need a more dynamic edge rusher. I like Benito, I like Cooper, but they're not elite. Baron Browning can be if he can stay healthy, hopefully, but I think you need to really, you're going to need to address edge rusher at some point. Yeah. Get somebody in there who's a very, very dynamic edge rusher that can change games. And so far, I haven't seen that. And then as a secondary, I know interior linebacker isn't what it used to be, and I have nothing against Singleton and nothing against Jewell. I think they're kind of those throwback thumpers that can go out there and make tackles, but neither one of them, and I've said this plenty of times, they don't make impact. And I'm not talking about like hitting hard. I'm talking about, you've got Alex Singleton, who's ranking very high in tackles. But if you look at the impact plays, tackles for loss, I think he's got 1 tackle for a loss, no interceptions, no forced fumbles, no sacks. If you go and look at somebody with 20 or even 25 less tackles on that list of, statistically, and you can pick out other players who have way more impact. Obviously like Fred Warner is one of the best interior linebackers. I think he's got 20 less tackles, but he has far more impactful plays than Alex Singleton. So, if I was going to say a secondary one, I would want somebody not necessarily like go out and draft a number 1 draft choice, but get an interior linebacker that can make an impact play. You've got to have somebody in that between Surtain and the defensive line, that from those rushers, have somebody in the middle who can actually make an impact would be good. That's where I'm at.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, on the defensive line, those are my secondary ones for sure. So the defensive line is definitely something that we need to look at.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for in the chat, and thank you, Ron, for jumping in for Luke. Really appreciate it. It's always great to chat with you. So I think we'll just wrap it up and say thank you so much for being here in the chat, and thank you for those that came out to the meet and greet. We really, really appreciate meeting you. It was fun, great time. So hopefully next year it'll be even a bigger turnout. But thanks so much, and again, have a great Wednesday evening, and hopefully the Broncos can find a way to stop the streak and beat the Chiefs coming up on Sunday.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.